Here are the answers to today's 3 revision questions. So question 14, we have changed the subject of the formula to b. So our formula here is L equals 3a minus root b. So the first thing we would need to do is get that b term across to the left hand side, and we obviously would like it to be positive, so we're going to add root b to both sides. So on the left hand side we're going to have L plus root b, and then on the right hand side we're going to have 3a. We now need to get the L term across to the right hand side, so we would subtract L from both sides. So we're going to have root b equals 3a minus L, and then to get the subject to be b instead of root b, we would square. So the opposite step to a square root is to square. So if we square the left hand side we get b, and if we square the right hand side we get 3a minus L all squared. So we're going to square all of that that's on the right hand side. Question 15, we have the graph shows y equals 5 sine x minus 4, and we're asked to find the coordinate of p and q. So to find the coordinate of p, we can use our knowledge of a basic sine graph. So the graph of y equals sine x. So the shape of that graph is the sort of S shape. So that is the graph of y equals sine x, and there are key points on here that I would expect you to know. So this maximum turning point up here is 91. Okay, it's along at 90 up to 1 as a y coordinate. So if we think of this graph, 5 sine x minus 4, the 5 tells us that this graph, if it was 5 sine x, would be a maximum turning point at 5. But the minus 4 tells us that it's been moved down 4 units. Okay, so that means that this point here is still actually going to be 1. So the point P is still actually going to be 90 along and 1 up. So 90 and 1. For Q and R, those are our 2 roots, and we know at those 2 coordinates that the y is a 0. Okay, so what we would do is we would set this equation to equal 0, okay, because the y is a 0. So 5 sine x minus 4 equals 0. So that's now just a trig equation, and we're going to go ahead and solve it. So the first thing we would do is rearrange this into sine x. So we would have 5 sine x equals 4, and then sine x equals 4 divided by 5. To find our related angle, we would do the inverse sine of 4 over 5, and that's going to give us 53. Now in this case, we don't actually need to go on and find a second solution. We could go on and use our cast diagram and find our second solution. So sine x is 4 over 5, so positive, so we have an answer in the A quadrant and the S quadrant. So our second answer would be 180 minus 53, which is going to give you 127. Now, we don't actually really need that because we would know that out of Q and R, Q has to be the first answer that we get of 53. So you don't really need to do that second bit, but you can do it if you would like to just do both solutions. So Q as a coordinate would be 53, 0. Okay, the last question we have is a factorise, and it's 2x squared plus 7x minus 15. Now there are a couple of different ways of the working for this. Depends on what teacher has shown you what method. I'm going to do it the way that I solve these ones, which I think is quite useful for if it is not a single x squared, so anything above that, so 2x squared, 3x squared, 5x squared. So what we do is we take the first coefficient and the last term, so the 2 and the minus 15, and we're going to multiply those. So 2 times minus 15, I'm just going to write that at the side here. So 2 times minus 15, so that's going to give us minus 30. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and write out all the pairs of numbers that multiply to give me minus 30. So we could have 1 and 30, or 1 and minus 30, or minus 1 and 30. We could have 2 and minus 15, or minus 2 and 15. We could have 3 and minus 10, or minus 3 and 10. And we could have 5 and minus 6, or minus 5 and positive 6. So we're now going to look for the pair that adds to give us the middle term, this plus 7. So out of all these pairs of numbers, the term that would, the pair of terms that would give us 7 is going to be minus 3 and plus 10. So that's the two terms that I'm going to use. So the first thing I'm going to do is, instead of that middle term, so 2x squared plus 7x minus 15. Instead of that middle term, I'm going to rewrite that with minus 3 and plus 10, because that is still 7. So that's going to give me 2x squared minus 3x plus 10x and minus 15. So I haven't actually done anything. I've just rewritten 7 as minus 3 and plus 10. Then what we're going to do is factorise the first two terms and factorise the second two terms. So if we factorise the first two terms, we've got 2x squared and we've got minus 3x. So the factor in these, the common factor in both of these would be just an x. So if we take x out as a common factor, we would have 2x minus 3. And then in the second bracket, we've got plus 10x and we've got minus 15. So the common factor to both of these would be a 5. And then in the bracket, we've got 2x and again minus 3. So what this gives us is the terms inside the two brackets should always be the same, because that's one of my brackets. So 2x minus 3. And then the other two terms that are left outside form the second bracket, so x plus 5. Okay, and you can always check that when you're finished and multiply it back out. So you would have there 2x squared with the first terms. The inside terms give you minus 3. The outside terms give you plus 10, so that's your plus 7. And then minus 3 times positive 5 for minus 15.